As Frank mentioned, my name's Chuck Hemenway. I'm Director of Business Development for Copyright Clearance Center. For those of you who don't know us, we're very much associated with the collection of royalties. But in the US, it's a very complicated process, so it means we're very much entrenched in technology, which brings us here. This exhibit I submit as reason why the attendance is so high at this year's event. Folks just cannot get enough of me. I've been with the CCC for 15 years. I've spent the last 4 years working on re-platforming custom software solutions that collected APCs onto a single shared platform. And it's led to some pretty exciting possibilities for the publishing market, for the content market. I hesitated to put this slide up because everybody's sick of hearing about OA and disruption, right? The disruption's happened, right? Things have changed, the revolution's over, and OA has won. But what we're still seeing in our interviews with publishers is that they're struggling to apply best practices in the management of data as it pertains to the financial aspects of scaling an open access program. So pure open publishers, probably not such a concern. For publishers with hybrid programs, really having a hard time getting to a place where they have what they need to deliver a good service to the author and to the other stakeholders that we're very concerned with, institutions and funders primarily. So in order to tell you about our solution, let's tell you a little bit about the problem. Our interviews with all of the stakeholders in the market have given us some basic truths, some gospel, that there are too many touches. There's an incredibly high administrative overhead to process a single manuscript's invoice. Publisher might touch it 8 times. The institution might send it back, and we do this process again. The funder may reject it if it has to go to the funder. And so there's an incredible amount of waste just in the payment of a single invoice. A lot of that falls to insufficient data, or the fact that the actors involved in that process, the author included, are not in possession of certain bits of knowledge that they need to make the process work properly. So our goal was to eliminate some of those frictions. Now, further complicating this issue are the matters of scale, right? With the goals set out by Horizon 2020 and other initiatives, if publishers and others can't get these processes down pat, things will continue to deteriorate. So shaping our thinking was that with the goals out there, the goals that have been set out there, what's going to need to happen, or we're going to have systems that know authors and their affiliations. We're going to have centralization of requests for funding. We're going to need aggregated payment options. That means multiple invoices all rolled up into one for the funder and institution's convenience. And we're going to need common data and accurate reporting. So where these roll are not going to be any surprise to this audience. You've heard it a million times, and I'm going to tell you for the 1,000,001st. Metadata is the critical element to making any of this work. And when I say metadata, I don't mean the basic bibliographic metadata that we've all mastered with the basic deposit schemes. I'm talking about the bits that need to be passed downstream to all of the other players in the space to execute on your behalf in various ways. So things like proper funder IDs, proper funder and, grant identifiers. There are many, many publishers that still struggle to ask for these. And I would say, while I have your attention, that what we've heard from all of the other stakeholders in the room is that it's time to ask. They're not so worried about the author getting calloused a little bit about having one more step in the process, but it is time to start pushing hard to get those specifically machine-readable identifiers. institutional affiliations, things like that. There are publishers and folks out there still doing drop-down fields. Don't let me catch you, because I'll give you an earful. So, whoops. The purpose of having that metadata is it's going to allow a more full automation of all of these processes that are costing you all money. If we have the proper metadata, we can codify all of those variables into a proper transaction for the author, right? Everybody publishes their price lists. Maybe 40 or 50% of the transactions in the market happen at those price points. Everybody gets a discount because of their university affiliation, their society affiliation, because they're a good guy who knows another guy. There's no such thing as paying what's on the rate card or on the menu in open access publishing. And once we have the metadata in place, this kind of sexy graph becomes possible for those of you who are into graphs. It allows new extensions of the common workflows to be offered out to institutions and funders. And what some of these are showing are things like author validation. So if we know the author's affiliation, we can then route that request off to university to have someone qualified look it over. So all of these new types of utilities become available, including things like reporting, which is really the third major need, the third major stumbling block in the market. If we can get some consensus and some cooperation around using proper identifiers, then we have a common pool of data that can be leveraged by all of the stakeholders in the market. So institutions, funders, and publishers will all be looking into the same pool of data and seeing the exact same thing. 1 minute, which has been a big friction point in our estimation. Folks are looking at different data. They're bickering about what's in the data. Why don't we start by looking at the same data? Now, I'm here to tell you that if we can rally around the identifiers, that the result will be the author's blissful ignorance to the financial aspects, which we heard mentioned this morning by a researcher. They don't want to know, they shouldn't have to know. Reduced overhead for all parties, and then that great shared reporting that everyone can leverage. And it exists today. We've built it. It will be available February 1st, and if anybody would like to know more, they can see me after class. And we would continue to invite you to give us your feedback. We're building a market-wide solution, and it requires input from all parts of the market. And at some point, it will require some help from other parts of the market as well. This has been publisher-funded so far. We're hoping that we can get some support from other areas of the market. So thanks for allowing me to give you an update, and I hope to talk to you soon.
Okay, well, a landscape study on open access and monographs, policies, funding, and publishing in 8 European countries. This is a study that I was fortunate enough to be involved with Ilko, who we all know, and Niels Stern from Denmark. It is a long study on the long-form publication, but we think it's been structured in such a way that if you go to it, when it's published by the end of the month, you'll be able to very easily navigate around and take out of it what you want for your work. So it was supported by Knowledge Exchange, FWF, Kristen, and Couperin. And these are the 8 countries that we looked at. So why were we looking at monographs? Well, we were looking at monographs because books are different. Books play a unique role in knowledge creation and scholarly communications. They're not just long articles. They have a different function, a different business model. They have additional formats quite legitimately for sale, the printed book. And so we really need to find better ways of making these products open access online. The importance of the book, I think, is best put by Jeff Krossick. There are lots of reasons, but the writing of the long-form publication, the monograph, is the research process. And this is really quite hard for people who've only worked in the journals world to grasp. But it is that long, hard slog for several years that creates the new knowledge. And the monograph, in effect, is big data. So when we talk about BPCs, book processing charges, versus APCs, these are actually quite different. And I like to talk about BPCs as not book processing charges, but book processing costs. What does it cost to publish a book? So then one looks at it slightly differently, first looking at it from a legacy perspective. Does it cover partial or full publishing costs? Partial income substitution? What about these other formats? Will we continue to sell print books or not? And we don't have enough experience yet to be absolutely sure of all this. Nevertheless, I would put it forward, and we have said, we've put our names to it in the publication, that the prospects look good for most European long-form scholarship to be published in open access despite some speed bumps along the way. That's really good news, I think. And the key finding was that there is, on the whole, overall, sufficient funding. And the question is really about rerouting much of the funding, not so much finding extra funding. But these 8 countries are very different. They're different in size, from 5 million to 85 million. They're different in book markets and traditional book practices, OA policies, funding streams, and publishers' approaches to OA. So we concluded that there is no single source of funding that is likely to cover all monographs, and the future will be a mix and match of approach. And we also have an environment where there's a variety of different types of publishers. And here we broke it down to 4 types. Yeah, traditional university presses, traditional commercial presses, new university presses, often based in libraries, and academic-led presses. So this is all quite new. But they all have similar publishing challenges: adapting old systems to new demands, developing new systems, creating and delivering new services, maintaining sustainability. A lot of these issues came up already today in especially the area of journal publishing. These issues are no different in principle in the world of books. So we were asked to develop a typology. And we looked at things this way, that way. We looked at certain typologies that had been drawn up by other reports. And in the end, we decided ours would follow the money. Where is the money coming from? So, Model 1, a BPC paid for by research funder. That's pretty straightforward. Model 2, BPC paid for by an author's institution. That's different, but it happens too. Model 3, membership funding. And there are a number of examples of this developing. There's an example with Lever Press. Model 4, mixed model funding. This is, I've taken the example of Language Science Press, which is looking to libraries, research institutions specializing in linguistics, and individuals in the field to crowdsource, come together with funding for a series of 33 books, for example, and Knowledge Unlatched is administering that. So Model 5 is embedded institutional support. There's a whole lot of this going on, particularly on the continent, where there's in-kind contribution of resources, which is partly what contributes to lower BPCs. than in the rapacious Anglo-Saxon world. Full institutional funding, that's new types of pure OA publishing, which act effectively as a cost center. And if there is a bit of revenue from print sales, it goes back to the university. There's some examples there. And so those are our 6 models. Well, how do we get from here to OA? I have a number of slides about this, and I'm not going to go through them all because I don't have time. How much time have I got? 1 minute. Perfect. But I've prepared them so that if, as and when they're posted, you can go through them. But for example, one is where university presses are already a cost center, it's really easy to go to OA, and there can be cost savings. Where university presses have, or other presses have print subsidies, take that print subsidy back and allocate it to OA. There's a lot of money floating around there. So now I am going to go to the last but one slide, if you'll allow me. So we also found that between policy and mandating, there was a big chasm. And so we came up with the idea of encouragement. Policies are not the same as mandates. Mandates are not always enforced. Compliancy issues abound. Standards are not there yet. Books have the same problem as journals. And supporting infrastructure is still incomplete. But it's all going in the right direction. So I can retire. I'm really delighted. So business models that accommodate OA monographs vary, and they can all be used in conjunction with one another. Infrastructure is improving. We know what we've got to do, so let's just get on with it. Thank you.
So firstly, I just want to apologise, as I do have a cold, so I may not be as coherent as I should be, although I've been told the adrenaline should keep me going. So today I'm here to talk to you about results-free review, which is a new model of peer review we're trialling on the fully open access, open peer review journal, BMC Psychology. And it's a model we're trialling in an effort to reduce publication bias, which is a problem that's particularly pronounced in the field of psychology. So I'm going to run through why we're doing it, how it works, and our current progress to date, and really what our next steps are and overall goals of doing this. So firstly, why results-free review? So I think this is well covered in this morning's session on open peer review, but just to give you a bit of context, so peer review, as you all know, is at the heart of what we do. And, for the most part, it does work well. It's designed to really to assess the validity, significance, and originality of scientific research findings. But more than ever, it's been called upon to detect fraud, plagiarism, bias, misconduct, and really this isn't what peer review came about for. And today, really, it's you'll be forgiven for really thinking it's in trouble. It's a process that is fraught with issues, and it's not perfect. And the headlines say it all, really. And without going into detail of all the issues, which have been, I think, adequately explored this morning, I'd just like to highlight that really with results-free review, what I'm interested in especially is the subjectivity and bias of peer review. As at least in today's publishing landscape, peer review is a process by which we very much rely on humans, so researchers, taking time out of their busy schedules to conduct peer reviews. And with that human nature, we do get this unconscious bias, this propensity to search for answers that support one's beliefs and to disregard those which do not. So peer review as a whole is changing, and as publishers and editors and so on, it's important that we listen to the scholarly research community and adapting to their needs. And it's certainly my opinion that peer review, really, there's no one-size-fits-all approach. And any interventions we do complete should be rigorously evaluated. So Just to hone in on the problem results-free review is aiming to address, publication bias, I'll talk you through a typical scenario, at least within the biomedical sciences. So we have a researcher, they run a series of studies with 20% statistical power. They receive a null result. And, this is seen as very much boring, uninformative. They decide not to write it up as the chance of it being an error is high, or they do decide to write it up and submit it, but actually they fail to convince the reviewers and the editors that it's worthy of publication. And it's actually more likely, and evidence suggests this, that the paper will be rejected due to methodological weaknesses. And so null studies in general, it's been shown, tend to be under greater scrutiny. On the other hand, they may receive a positive result. This is exciting, it's novel. They convince themselves that despite the low statistical power, it's worthy of publication, and they're more likely to convince the reviewers and editors. So generally what we see is positive results being used to justify poor methods. So in other words, the file drawer problem, negative results do not see the light of day, and we have an excess of positive results in the published literature. So this is a thorny problem with many potential solutions, but one potential solution is results-free review. And simply put, with results-free review, we're aiming to base editorial decisions on the quality of the study rather than the results or the strength of the study results. And with BMC Psychology, which is fully open access and open peer review, and what I mean by open peer review, just in the spirit of the talks earlier, open reports and open identities, we very much had a community around this journal that was in support of initiatives that aim to address publication bias, and it really is a well-recognised issue within this field especially. So we started to trial results-free review as a new model in December 2016, and we're currently just coming to the end of our feasibility phase of the pilot. And our aim with it is really to address the bias that we see in the peer review process that contributes to publication bias as a whole. And this bias is with the authors, the reviewers, the editors, throughout the whole process, really. And it's our hope that results-free review will hopefully really just hone in on the methods themselves, as we believe this is an integral part of the research process, and it's too often overlooked, and basing the decisions on the methods and rationale alone. So how does it work? From an author's perspective, the process is simple, so 2 stages. Stage 1, should they opt in to results-free review at submission, an otherwise complete version of the manuscript, but minus the results and discussion, is sent out for peer review. And the peer reviewers will ask the same questions as normal in keeping with the standards of the journal. And should the manuscript meet the scientific merits and the standards set for the journal, the author is then provided with an in-principle acceptance. So this is a major benefit for the author, and it's our hope that this really incentivises authors to write up high-quality studies with null results and submit them to the journal. And armed with this in-principle acceptance, the manuscript then enters stage 2, so the review of the complete version of the manuscript, so including the results and discussion. And at this stage, only minor revisions can be requested. So really, it's a case of just checking that the results adhere to the methods, question being asked, and rejection should only occur at this stage should the results deviate unjustifiably from the rationale methods. And then, of course, enter the next phase of publication. So from an editorial point of view, it's a little bit more complicated, as I'm sure you can imagine. So I'm not going to go into the different stages because we don't have all day, and I think I'm probably close to the end of my time already. But it's very much a case, really, it's not a flashy technological solution that we've adapted for results-free review, but simply a change in terms of communication. So majority of the changes we've made to our peer review system have really been to the template emails that we've used, especially when communicating with editors, so that they're very clear on what version they're seeing of the manuscript. And certainly when we first rolled out, we did get a few, why are there no results in this paper, and those kind of questions. So communication really is key, and that's been integral to optimizing the workflow for this model of peer review. So in terms of current progress, what we've shown to date is that results-free review is feasible, so we know it works. In terms of opt-in rate, we've had about 30% of authors opt-in to results review. It's not as high as we'd like, so we're really focused now on optimizing the workflow, making it as attractive and simple as possible for authors. For example, instead of asking them to remove the results and discussion at submission, doing this for them, just making it as easy as possible and as clear as possible in terms of the aims and overall goal of this pilot, very much involving them and making them part of the experiment. So in terms of observations to date, a small sample size, but what we've seen so far is that the manuscripts that have undergone results review have had a higher acceptance rate. And contrary to our initial concerns, the turnaround time has been faster. So one of the concerns raised by the board initially, although they were very supportive of the concept, was that it may take longer, but in actual fact, it's been faster. And anecdotally, we've seen a greater focus on the transparency of reporting and the clarity with which the question that's being asked is reported in the article. So in terms of the community feedback, one thing that's been really positive about this is the way in which authors have engaged with the process, written their own blogs, really fed back, and very much, I think, felt a part of the experiment. But of course, we've shown it works, but does it reduce publication bias? So in terms of next steps, our plan is to roll out a full randomized controlled trial with the aim of ultimately providing an evidence-based solution to address publication bias and the wider reproducibility crisis. And of course, we don't know if it works, so it's very much an experiment. And throughout, we plan to be open and evidence-based in our approach. So just before I finish, I just want to acknowledge that my colleagues that have been working with me on this, and especially Dr. Kate Button at the University of Bath, without whom results review would not have been launched, and who had the idea and has very much been spearheading it within the research community. So thank you very much, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Liz. Any questions?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure how you can do a randomized trial, because that would mean you're kind of forcing the authors who are randomized into the intervention arm to kind of send you their methods, or I'm not really sure how this is going to work.
Yeah, so I can just briefly explain what our, once we've completed our analysis of this feasibility phase, so in addition to estimating, the core parameters of the trial, what we're thinking, at least now, is that what we'll do is have still rely upon authors to opt in at submission. So they've consented to being a part of the trial, and then randomise them, say either undergo results review or not. But what our plan is to really scale up, so involving other journals and hopefully get a bigger sample size more quickly. Does that answer your question?
I think you're not the only one that's doing this, right? There's this concept of registered reports.
Yeah, so registered reports. Yeah, so registered reports is actually something we're very much supportive of at BMC as well. And I probably don't have enough time to go into it, but we very much see it as a complementary approach, so, and very much the gold standard in an ideal world. So simply put, the difference is registered reports is before the study is completed. Results review offers a solution for after the study is completed. But I'm happy to talk with you, say, in the next coffee break about that in detail.
So as you can see from the title, I'm going to talk about why open access is good. But I'm sure I don't need to preach to the converted. So what I just want to highlight are the opportunities that the open access offers and our own experience of actually exploring them. Now, when talking about advantages of the open access publishing, it's quite common to focus on the free access to information, the ability to read a publication of interest and to share this information with others. And while this certainly serves a very important purpose, it's not the whole story. As there is more to paper than just an abstract, there's more to open access than the right to read. More than 2.5 million scholarly publications are published yearly. Even if every one of them becomes open, the vast amount of information they possess cannot possibly be processed by individual researchers. And the content that is not explored is content that doesn't exist, at least in terms of advancing science. So from that perspective, to unlock the true potential of the open access, we need new tools for literature research to be developed. And developers worldwide are already working on that problem. But however, licensing, distributed content, and non-machine readable formats do present barriers to this task. To help overcome these challenges, there is a need for common resources that aggregate structured open content available for reuse. At Europe PMC, we focus on developing infrastructure that caters to the needs of the text mining community. We hope that this infrastructure will help maximize the potential for reuse of the open content. Now, Europe PMC is a comprehensive resource of biomedical publications. It's a designated repository for the open access publication mandates of 28 life science funders. It's also a part of PubMed Central International Repositories Network. Altogether, Europe PMC combines nearly 33 million abstracts and 4.3 million full-text articles and aggregates open access content from many open access publishers. As part of our mission, we want to enable contributors to integrate their own tools and resources with the data that we host, enriching the content in many different ways. Therefore, we have developed a community annotation platform, and this serves an ambitious aim. We want to capitalize on the text mining advances from the research community itself and bring them to a broader audience of readers and developers. The platform called sci.AI accepts text mining contributions from a variety of sources and displays these outputs as an overlay on open access research articles. In short, and put simply, it's a publishing platform for annotations. The annotations are available both programmatically and on the website as highlighted concepts or sentences in the publication text. We text mine the entire open access corpus, but we cannot display the results on articles that don't allow derivative work. So sci.AI annotations appear on all abstracts and over 1 million full-text articles with CC BY, CC BY-NC, and CC0 licenses, about a quarter of all full-text publications. The benefits of sci.AI are multiple-fold. On one hand, the annotation platform enables the text mining community to access content and publish the results of text mining, giving exposure to their work to a wider audience. But in turn, it of course provides a valuable tool for readers, enabling them to scan articles for key concepts, understanding if article is relevant without having to read it fully. It can assist with evidence search when you try to extract facts and information from the text. A researcher reading an annotated publication can see which kind of drugs were used for treatment, which model organism the work was done in, or which genes were involved in disease treatment, all without having to go into the details themselves. In addition to that, annotations serve another important purpose. They can help to bridge the gap between literature and data. In sci.AI, individual annotations are linked to corresponding records in public life sciences and chemistry databases. For example, an annotation for a chemical will contain a link to a chemical dictionary, providing a wealth of additional information about this particular compound and complementing the original article. They can also promote data reuse by tracking primary data sets. Now, sci.AI annotations make it easier to locate the underlying data record mentioned in the text, be it a genome sequence or a protein structure. The data is identified by mining accession numbers, unique IDs from public data repositories. This also enables researchers to search for publications citing specific data sets. For example, finding all mentions of a patient mutations that occurs in a specific geographical region, or exploring structural information for specific disease targets. sci.AI is a relatively new development. It was launched in 2016. But we can already see the impact that it had. For example, Open Targets platform is a public-private initiative to transform drug discovery. It is delivered by industry partners such as GSK and Biogen, together with European Bioinformatics Institute and the Sanger Institute. Open Targets is a free resource for potential drug targets associated with a disease. The platform itself utilizes the open content hosted on Europe PMC, and their text mining pipeline was partially developed based on that of Europe PMC. They have recently become sci.AI provider, supplying annotations on gene disease associations, which means that the information flow is now bidirectional. It benefits both sides that share the information between each other. So you can see that in this case, literature can actually enable a real-world application beyond simply reading an article. It can bring closer potential therapeutic treatments to our world. And based on that, we think that open content has actually a really great potential for new ideas. Sci.AI is just one example, one of the numerous possibilities that open access enables. But with the right conditions, open content can spawn incredible ideas. And when we remove barriers, such as restrictive licensing, such as text locked away in PDF format that has to be procured paper by paper from individual publishers, then scientific literature becomes the next generation fuel for next generation science. And we see open content as a platform for new developments and a platform for innovation, and we hope that you share this vision. With that, I want to both thank you for your attention, but also thank you for being open for the benefit of everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Roman, and I'm system architect at sci.AI, and what we are doing, we are trying to read whole research communication, biomedical research communication, understand it, and then communicate to other algorithms in very transparent way by standardized metadata. So, and today we are going to talk about how to use these standard ways to further advanced research communication and how to use it within publishing process. So actually, well, it's a little bit late, so thank you all for staying here. Yeah, and what I'm thinking about, what if you will reverse presentation? And yeah, I want to start with simple question. Please raise hands. Yeah, here is banana. So, who of you heard that actually banana might increase mood and make you feel happier? Yeah, one? Oh, we do new discovery today. Okay, great. So, what I wanted to show you, we did a small experiment. Actually, yes, maybe it turned out that it's not so very well-known fact. So, actually, when researcher has some observation, he or she formulates a question. And in this case, we will formulate question like, is banana really connected to my happiness? Or if connected, then how? And actually, it turns out that it is not so easy to investigate how it is connected to feeling of happiness. And good news that actually it makes you happy twice. First, by processing carbohydrates and ingesting insulin to your brain. So it tells like, nobody's going to eat you, just relax and eat your banana. And second, yeah, and only after that, tryptophan going to our brain, and then it synthesizes serotonin, and then makes us happy in relatively long term. Why are we discussing banana at Open Access Conference? So we're discussing it because can you imagine that the whole chain, whole pathway will be ever described in single paper, and that researcher will find all the answers to his or her hypothesis or question. No way. So, solution actually could be brought by journals, and journals can make this miracle happen. Yeah, I will go in a little bit earlier. So by converting accessible papers into actionable papers with the help of metadata. So what could be done? If we have definitions of particular term, what actually Maria recently also shown us, and you have relationships between biomedical terms directly in the paper and which are defined in a machine-readable way, then the paper becomes really actionable. It can be reused to make further discoveries, and that's very important. So in our platform, we actually serialize this data in standard ways, in JATS format, which actually turns out to be perfectly compatible with WC standards, and HTML and RDF, pure RDF and API. So we did an experiment with Google, and as you might see, Google actually perfectly recognizes identifier of tryptophan in this case. So what does it mean? That it will interlink this particular paper, this particular statement, to the global knowledge graph. That means that paper will be much higher as a result returned to the search query. And as you might see, actually, it is achievable without using any specific methods except standard Web Consortium recommendations or even standards. Yeah, sorry. Okay. Of course, one of applications is to use additional hints that will explain complex terms in the paper. And we hope that it will lead to more citations as well. Yeah, this one we saw already. So actual next steps that could be done. First of all, those JATs can be used already, like directly from the very beginning of the publication process, directly from the moment of submission of the paper. And we hope that it will be published next to the standard PDF file. Then second, you can use it as part, or let's say, a substitution of standard simplified HTML, and you can enrich it with a lot of microdata. And the third approach, so first and second are actually very easy, and third one is full integration with electronic publishing platform. Yeah, that's it, and thank you for listening.